Hey guys, it's Sammy out here back with another video. So we're going to do a recap of my 2025-2026 season, but we're just going to do a little recap from Worlds 2025 running through LAIC. So starting with Worlds, I finished 77th place playing my Boltic deck, my Raging Bolt Joltic deck. It was kind of something I was experimenting with starting at NAIC about 3 months before Worlds. Here is a deck list I played to that NAIC. As you can see, it's a little bit less refined from my Worlds list. It's kind of something I was experimenting with, and I had some success with it. I started 5-2, but in my last 2 rounds, I lost to some pretty good Grimmsnarl players. So over the summer, I was kind of refining it, tweaking it, and by like July, I was pretty set on playing it. I would text my group chat every day, just say Boltic, and they would laugh at me. But anyways, I brought it to Worlds in Anaheim, did pretty well, finished 77th place, made day 2, which is pretty good because this season I barely made Worlds. I kind of crawled and I was one of the last people to get in. I was at 720, the cutoff was 700, but those 700s, I mean, at the time we weren't sure if they were going to get in. They got in on a play point tiebreaker, but I was one of the last spots. So like at the live results, I was seeing my name at the very end, right above cutoff. So I barely limped into Worlds. So getting day 2, having a good finish really meant a lot to me. Kind of showed that, you know, to myself that I belonged. Actually, in my win, I beat Riki Okada, which felt really good to beat a really good player to make it into day 2 with my own deck. I always kind of like playing rogue strategies because honestly sometimes I get a little bored from the meta decks. I do play them sometimes, but sometimes I get a little bored with them and I try my own thing. You know, going to tournaments, sometimes I think it's kind of cool to have your own thing. It's kind of like a you against the world kind of situation, which I like. I think it kind of gives me some energy or aura, you could say. And I don't know, that really does actually drive me sometimes because I feel like you're not only backing up, you know, your own results. It's kind of like your own test, and that makes it mean really so much more to me and probably motivates me to do even better. Years before I played Pokemon, I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was in middle school, and one of my favorite players, his name was Evan Vargas. He always innovated his own deck. He actually, if you guys play Yu-Gi-Oh!, he was one of the first people to play Monarchs with Soul Exchange. So I remember when I was in middle school and I was following that, I always really looked up to him, and I kind of like always looked up to players who could kind of, you know, do their own thing, do something a little bit different and have success with it. But anyways, here is the Boltic deck I played to Worlds in Anaheim. And as we go through the video, you'll see, you know, several variations of this list that honestly probably weren't as good. But we will talk about that. So going to Pittsburgh was the first regional of the season. As funny as it sounds, this is kind of like my home regional. It was, I mean, it's about 6 hours from me, but it's in Pennsylvania. I'm in Pennsylvania too, but I'm in South Central PA, and this is Western PA. So this is the regional a lot of my locals went to. So it's always cool to see your locals at the regional level because sometimes a lot of those players don't go to a ton. At this regional, I had a lot of people come up to me and congratulate me on my Worlds finish, which meant a lot to me because I don't think I ever had that many people really come up to me and talk to me. Even some people I've never met, which is pretty cool because I'm not that big of a name. I'm not very loud on Twitter, so not a lot of random people know about me. But going to Pittsburgh, the meta was, you know, pretty similar to Worlds. Dragapult was solo deck to beat, so was Goldango and Guardy. So weakness of the Boltic deck is it can be pretty bad going first. So that is why I decided to make some of the changes I did. So here is the list I played to Pittsburgh. As you can see, you'll see some Power Glasses mainly, which is the big thing with this list, Power Glass and Heavy Crispin. So the idea of this is if I would lose the flip and go first, I could kind of turbo through my deck with Squawkabilly and Carmine, and eventually you want to end up with Iron Hands in the active with maybe 3 energy, 2 or 3. So you would want to get one from, you get one from a manual attachment, and then you get one from Power Glass. So in the next turn, you could just crisp it onto it, and then you can amp from turn 2, even going first. Because against a lot of decks, either play Badoo or Frillish, they would item lock you. So this pretty much negates the item lock and lets you get the first 2 right away. And essentially, if you can pull this off, you put a lot of pressure on them. So my testing, this actually did work reasonably well. The tournament, it did not work very well. I think I went 3, 4, and 1. So some of the problems I have with this list is you can see some of my accounts are a little bit too thin. We're a little bit lower on RNG, and we're not playing the Miraidon, which kind of cost me some consistency. I think I went a little bit too far into this idea of getting Iron Hands turn 2 going first. So sometimes, even when I would get the combo, I get the Iron Hands, but then after that point, my deck didn't function as well because I cut some counts, so I'd miss consistency later in the game. I lost, I think, 2 games where I just needed like 1 fighting energy or Define a Raging Bull, and as you can see, those are some counts I cut on for this list. So in the end, I would say it pretty much wasn't worth it, because a lot of times I would either miss the combo and be in a really bad spot, or I would get the combo and then later in the game, after my opponent kind of reestablished and got back in the game, I was too far in the back foot because I cut a lot of counts. So I think that's really something that happened here. I was trying a little bit too hard to, I would say, maybe beat everything, for lack of a better term. So Pittsburgh did not go very well. I think it went 3, 4, and 1. So the next regional was Milwaukee. I actually chose to skip this one. I usually skip a few regionals throughout the year. I was getting ready for a move. I mean, not a big move, just 20 minutes away. So I kind of just skipped that one to focus on some other things. But this is the first regional of Mega Evolutions, and most of them did not do very much, which was a little bit disappointing. Would have liked to see some of the meta change a little bit. I was a big Mega Venusaur fan, but it did not show up pretty well, so I was disappointed. Another side note about Milwaukee, I think after you play a while, everyone has a city they don't like for whatever reason. I've been to Milwaukee 2 times, and both times I ended up driving home that same night of the regional because I was that much on tilt. Like I played a regional, didn't make day 2, and would drive the 13 hours home in one sitting because I was just like, get me out of here. So maybe it's a good idea I skipped that one. So it's a big gap between Pittsburgh and then the next region I went to, which was Las Vegas. And as I said, had a lot going on, was getting ready for a move. So my personal life, I was probably honestly going on too many Hinge dates, getting a little distracted, which I think maybe led into some of my maybe subpar performances at the start of the year, which I'll kind of elaborate on more. I was also putting in a lot of time in Pokemon, probably about between 4, 5, sometimes 6 hours a day, but I feel like sometimes my true full heart wasn't into it. A lot of, playing games on live, kind of like on autopilot. Live is a good, I think live is good for testing, but sometimes when you're just queuing games on autopilot, it's not the best. Usually I like to mix my practice with live, tabletop testing, and using the Limitless simulator. I'm playing both sides of a matchup so I can see, sometimes how other decks operate. I can see some of their plays into my deck. So going into Las Vegas, I was still on the Baltic train. Once again, I wanted to find a way that the deck could be better going first, if that would happen. So here is actually a failed version I did try. You can see it uses Magneton. So it's kind of like what Miraidon will use. You can blow up the Magneton to accelerate energy to an electric Pokemon. So essentially what you would do is you would get the Magnemite, get your board all set up, then turn 2, if you went first, you would blow up the Magneton, accelerate to Iron Hands, and then from there you would amp and then take I guess it'd be 1 prize lead, because you give up 1 prize from using Magneton, but you essentially just it's a better way to initiate the prize trade if it works out. So I didn't end up bringing this to Las Vegas. So I had these numbers. I keep track of how many times, like, going first, I was able to pull it off. I think it was about, and I did it against, I would test it against item lock, and I think it was only about like 40-ish%. I did have his numbers, but it was on my old iPhone, which I smashed at the gym, which is actually the third time in my life I smashed a phone at the gym, so you think I learned. But anyway, I do know it was like lower 40%, which isn't enough. It was hard to pull off because, you know, you would get your board set up and you either get Bedewed or Frillish, so you need to draw into the Magneton Raw, and you don't play. You can see I did have the Carmine here, but it's not as much draw as like some with Professor's Research. So I was seeing less cards, so sometimes I just want to get it. I tried to nullify this by playing, you know, 2 copies of Magneton, but it didn't work enough for me to feel confident in, because it feels like a big investment if it wasn't even working out half of the time. It was fun when it worked out, and sometimes even when you go second, you can make a second Iron Hands after the first one goes down, it was honestly really fun, but I decided to not go with this. So instead, I played what is on the screen now. So essentially, what you do if you go first, you had the option of using Wellspring to initiate the prize trade. You know, you turn 1, you can attach to it, or you can attach it and you can Crispin. If you manage to knock item locked, you can also just E-search off it. You can also get an Iron Hands technically going first because you can attach to it, E-switch off the Teal Mask, and then Crispin. But that's a 4 energy, 4 energy investment. And like I said, a lot of decks you're getting item locked, so that wasn't as plausible. But it did happen sometimes. But the Wellspring was a lot easier. You know, you could attach to it and just Crispin, and most of the times, no items needed. Once again, this also did not go well for me. I think I went 3, 4, and 1 again. And it was essentially kind of the same issues. I had thinner accounts of some consistency cards. You can see I didn't run Miraidon again. I was getting really greedy trying to not play Miraidon, and I think it cost me. As you can see, like, less energy, less grass energy, and like I said, even sometimes I would get the Wellspring play, and then like later on it would fold a little bit. I think the E-switches were like a lot of times kind of dead cards in the mid to late game, and I would lose some games because I would be in a good position, and like mid game where I get Ionoed or disrupted in some way, those E-switches kind of bad cards would clog my hand. It'd be kind of useless. So that's what happened a lot. A little bit of a controversial thing to me to say, but another frustrating thing about Pittsburgh and Las Vegas is, in my opinion, I just lost to some players I really shouldn't have lost to. You know, some players, I'm kind of watching them, they didn't really know what they're doing, but my deck is just not functioning, so it kind of would suck to just sit there and watch that when I just had nothing going on. But I mean, congrats to them, because I mean, they did win. But like I said, I think, you know, Overcooked is a good way to describe some of these decks. Like, trying to do a little bit too much. There's like a good balance of, like, you know, trying to improve a deck on some of its weaknesses and just trying to be like generally consistent. And I think I went too far in the wrong direction at some of these tournaments here. Also, I think like heading to Las Vegas, maybe some of my mindset wasn't the best. Like I said, I was focused on moving, doing too much of my dating life. I remember texting my friend, I was having like a brain fog when I was testing. I was like testing autopilot. Like, I was playing a lot of games, but maybe they weren't like as high value games as I'm used to. So I feel like in some ways my preparation wasn't the best. Actually, I think right after I landed in Las Vegas, I went and got some Mike's Hard Lemonade and just pounded those while my friends were testing, so maybe I should have tested instead. Because I never day drink, so that's probably wasn't a good sign. Probably a bad omen of the upcoming weekend. So I'm not sure what place I finished. I didn't really care. It wasn't anything. Another subpar finish, you know, kind of, you know, I knew I could do better. I just needed to find the right play for me. And then a week, technically less than a week after, we had LASC. I think it was, so I flew out of Vegas on Sunday, and then like I think for LASC, you fly out Wednesday night, you land like Thursday midday. That's how the time works. So not a lot of time, and I do work. Technically, kind of had two jobs. So I don't have a lot of time. I think I pulled one all-nighter and like one almost all-nighter heading up to LASC because I had to find something quick. Was gonna play probably Raging Bull something because I didn't have enough time to pick up something completely. I was actually looking at Zorro, but I played a few games, realized I didn't have enough time for that. So something you'll probably notice about me is I like playing, aggro decks of ways to cheat prizes. So the first two tournaments, Iron Hands wasn't working. So I was trying Togekiss. I was trying a few Togekiss builds leading up to this. I actually think at Las Vegas, I was considering Togekiss actually. I have the list here. I was testing up for Las Vegas, but I didn't play it. It's kind of, use the Rocks engine to kind of draw a lot of cards, help you find your Togekiss pieces, then you evolve into Togekiss, and usually a lot of games, if you even flip one heads at any point, you can win the game. So that's essentially what I was thinking, but I decided for Las Vegas to go with Iron Hands instead. But heading to LSC, I was going to give Togekiss a try. I think actually even up to the point I was landing, I was kind of set on the Rocks engine I have listed here. But I wasn't sure really. Like I said, I didn't really have as much time heading to this event, but it was something I tested and it worked reasonably well. So I was hoping, it would go well, flip a few heads. Actually, but then the night before the tournament, I'm like, you know what? Instead of using Rocks, I'm gonna put in a thin Noctowl line and a Fan Rotom to help me find my pieces better. And it worked okay. I think, so at LASC, I went 4-4-1. I actually somehow got points from this, which I didn't even know until like the spring, because I just assumed I'd get points. But LASC has a little bit lower attendance than other ICs because, it's a little harder to get to. So usually has a little bit lower attendance. But anyway, at LASC, I played the list here. So it's kind of like normal Raging Bolt list, but you evolve into Togekiss, and at some point, eventually you flip a heads or two. I did know my first matchup against Terravox player, I did flip heads for him, which felt good. But there was two Goldango decks I've needed one heads and didn't get them. I think if I got heads against either of them, I won, which kind of felt good, but essentially this is literal gambling, so I can't be too mad. Like I said again, I was trying to play an aggro deck of a way to, cheat some prizes, and I don't really know what to really say about this. I think in hindsight, like months and months later, I should have just played either a different deck, Goldango, or essentially my World's Baltic list with which had the higher counts consistency. And spoiler alert, that's kind of what I played later in the year, but we'll get to that in another video. But like I said, I think the main theme of this fall was I was being too cute with like some counts, some list ideas. I mean, obviously the event might have had a different story if I flipped a heads or two, but I do think the idea was nice, but I don't really think it was really the way to go in hindsight. So this is probably a third of the season gone already, and it's off to a bad start. I still didn't make any day twos, and I put a few years, so I wasn't too discouraged. I didn't feel good, obviously. I wasn't too discouraged about it. I just knew I needed to either, there was about a 2-month break between LASC and Toronto, so I knew I probably was time to, play more boring meta decks, or if I'm going to play something off the beaten path, make sure it's a little bit, less cute. So, I had 2 months to kind of, keep playing, play some locals, refine things, and see where things stood. I knew I was a good player. I had confidence in my skills, so I wasn't too worried that I was going to figure it out. But, it would just felt nice to have at least one good finish heading into the Thanksgiving and Christmas season, because it kind of sucks to sit home on the holidays with no majors, just thinking about how you're just trying to get that first one. of a season, kind of get things on a roll, essentially, you know, show yourself you can do it again, which I knew I could, but it would have been nice to have that under my belt at this point in the season. And, you know, I'll kind of say this to some newer players, you know, with the new season coming up, I know players are, you know, going to try for invites for the first time. And, like, if something like this happens to you where, you know, you're not playing good and it's like maybe like a third of the season gone, you know, just kind of don't give up, because it is a long season. You just got to keep evaluating your play and your decks and just like, yeah, keep going and grinding. Because I feel like this is where a lot of players who, honestly, at this point, like, there's a point of summer, like July, June, everyone gets excited when they see the world's emails go out to our players, like, that's gonna be me next year. And it's a little bit like the gym in the new year. Everyone's real excited at the start, and like they kind of like take a few lumps to realize it's not as easy as they thought, and they give up. And this is like the holiday season and like going into winter is when I see, you know, a lot of players drop off. And like my advice to them is, you know, if this is what you want, you should always keep going and don't give up. Because, you know, it's not, progress is not linear. I know it's a really cringe thing to say, but it's like with anything, progress is not linear. You know, sometimes things go really bad, but you gotta really evaluate yourself, push through the bad times. Why that happened? Was it luck, bad deck, bad performance, bad variance? You just gotta keep going. So that's my advice to new players, because a few of you who will try for the first time this upcoming year are gonna sit around LASC Christmas time, and you won't be having the season you want it, and that's when you really gotta dig in, because, you know, you could be close to breaking out. So like I said, as you can see, the fall was not kind to me, but I was just gonna go back to the drawing board and I was gonna keep going. So in the next video, we're gonna talk about, you know, the winter. We're gonna talk about like after LASC all the way into the Puerto Rico special event is the time frame we will be covering.